Geheimnisnacht, the Warhammer version of Christmas, or, well, winter solstice to be precise, but close enough for government work, and seeing as the last Law Friday of the year falls on Christmas Day, I really couldn't resist doing a video on Geheimnisnacht. This, however, is not a time of cheer and holiday spirit in the Warhammer world. Rather, it is a time of fear, of caution, and of countless countermeasures being taken against the rise of Morslib, the demon moon. For there are two bodies in constant orbit around the Warhammer world. The first is Manslib in Reichsspiel. It means the beloved of Manan, and is dedicated to the god of the sea, Manan. It is a simple moon, a ball of rock, dirt, some iron, some moon dust, and it is neither a portent of any particular ill or good fortune. But the second moon, Morslib, in the same vein, meaning the beloved of Mor, the god of death, is most decidedly an ill omen. In no small part due to the fact that it is also a tremendously massive chunk of solidified warpstone orbiting the Warhammer world, and its relative position closer to or further from the planet often determines the strength of the winds of magic. Furthermore, during the majority of the year, Morslib is exceptionally difficult to track and virtually impossible to predict. You might think that if Morslib has such a great an effect upon the winds of magic, one would be able to determine with a considerable degree of accuracy when the winds will be at their most powerful and at their weakest. The problem is, Morslib seems to follow none of the rules of its more normal sibling. Some days, Morslib is seen high in the sky, and the next it might be closer, much closer. Other nights it might be nowhere near where it was spotted the preceding night, as if its orbit changes suddenly and drastically. Even more peculiar, it doesn't appear to actually affect the Warhammer world in the ways that a moon would normally do. For example, regardless of how crazy Morslib is wigging out, it doesn't appear to change the tides in any observable way. The liquid tides, at least, as its effect upon the winds of magic is far more easily observable. Now, this raises many questions as to what exactly Morslib is, as if it was truly a chunk of rock or warpstone spinning around the planet in a crazy orbital pattern. It should affect a hell of a lot more than just magic, and yet it does not. Quite the mystery there. But, as fascinating as the orbital physics of the Warhammer world would no doubt be, it is not the subject of today's video. So let us instead get back to the topic of Geheimnisnacht and the precise effect it has upon the Warhammer world. As I mentioned, it is an easily observable one, and virtually all of the races and nations in the Warhammer world know of the night and its effects, and take various measures either to harness it or to protect themselves against it. To the dwarves, for example, the night is known as Ar Uzkul, with Uzkul in Khazalid, the dwarven language, meaning death and bones. To the dwarves, it is a time of heightened readiness and increased preparedness, where the runesmiths venture down into the deepest mines dug in the glory days of the Dwarven Empire to shore up the various runes and markings on the doors and barricades, to guard against both corporeal and less easily observable invaders. To the Bretonnians, the night is known as Winter's Eve, and the peasant populace tend to take extra care that they know where the closest keep and garrison is on these nights. Whilst in the Empire, Geheimnisnacht is usually a time when many villagers and populaces seek out those same fortifications to shelter within their walls, at least for a night. The traditions on whether or not this is allowed or encouraged vary greatly from state to state. In the Drakwold, for example, it's not a matter of tradition. It's a matter of simple survival, as Geheimnisnacht tends to rile up the beastmen to a downright unreasonable degree. The reason for that might be hinted at in the elven names for the night. The High Elves of Ulthuan call it Twilight's Tide. Not a particularly cheery name, but it pales in comparison to the name given to it by the Dark Elves. Death Night. Yeah, that gives a pretty clear indication of what is to be expected. Because, of course, the presence of the Chaos Moon, high and visible in the sky, is a tremendous boon to everyone who worships chaos. It is the night of year where witch hunters and inquisitors have the most work laid out on their platter, as chaos and cultist activity across the civilized realms of men increase tenfold, as every single coven or cult, regardless of size or ambition or whether or not they're even serious in the first place, all try to carry out their own various rituals, which can vary considerably in size and scope. Spoiled Empire nobles out for a little bit of a thrill, for example, might have joined a secret collective, and on dark nights like these, they gather together in their daddy's wine cellar and pretend to be witches, casting a spell on rival students at the local school that they just don't like very much. These rituals are of no real importance. It includes maybe the sacrifice of a small farm animal, a sheep or a cow if they're really going all out. And meanwhile, in the deeper, darker forests, the real cultists begin gathering. They might plan to sacrifice a local virgin, a group of captives taken over the year, kidnapped from their homes. They might even gather to call allies from the forest to raid entire communities and villages, offering up their bloods and souls as sacrifice to the great ones dwelling beyond the veil. And on Geheimnisnacht, both have a decent chance of actually succeeding with their aims. Suddenly the stupid little incantations of a group of school children result in that one unpopular student being run over by a wagon the next day. Or in the case of the cultists, perhaps it might result in the appearance of something far more evil in the world. Many times, even the most dedicated cults are never quite sure what they're asking for before the 5-meter-tall horned demon stands in front of them, asking for just a few more souls. And of course it need not be either one of these two admitted opposite extremes, as everyone in between also vies for their own sliver of the magical power flowing freely through the world, like a river of radioactive Christmas presents. Aspiring witches and industrious mages alike all try to grab out their box and weave spells of protection, of destruction, of enchantment or travel. Some might even contemplate completely different goals and agendas, like a small, ambitious rat man looking up at the moon and wondering if a large enough rocket might just get him there. Hey, even the end times had some good ideas, right? And for yet others, again, the night takes on more of a religious aspect, though the idea of protection and warding does tend to remain. For example, in Sylvania, the land of the vampire count, who, mind you, are not quite the monsters they might sound like or be made out to. Oh, yeah, they're pretty horrible and they can commit some vile acts here and there, but they do understand that if they wipe out all the humans, they'll have nothing to live off. Some of the vampire counts have even taken on that personality of feudal lord and take it rather seriously. In certain villages in Sylvania, for example, the taxation levels are considerably lower than in the rest of the empire, and instead the count's servants simply collect donations of vita on occasion instead. Despite this alternative tax arrangement, however, Sylvania remains an extremely wild and dangerous land, since even the most benevolent vampire count view their servants as livestock, essentially. And surely the livestock are able to protect themselves from the other animals, right? The ghouls, the insane vampires, or the various monsters that stalk the swamps or dark forests of Sylvania. Turns out, frequently, that's not quite the case. And so death is a frequent companion of the Sylvanian populace. And so on Geheimnisnacht, they light candles for every person that a family has lost. They then place the candle in the room where the individual passed on, in case they were so lucky to die of old age in bed. Alternatively, and far more frequently, they will place a small lit candle out on the steps in front of their house for those souls that have died outside. This is both to honor and venerate their fallen, and also to make sure that they don't come home again too soon. Or if they do, at the very least, they'll be reminded that the people who live in their house now love and cherish them, and hopefully that'll stop them from being too aggressive when they visit. It's Sylvania. You'll take whatever precautions you can if you live there. And speaking of precautions, we have already briefly mentioned them, but they are taken pretty much in every nation across the old world. We mentioned fleeing to nearby garrison or fortresses, whom would undoubtedly put on an extra guard for Geheimnisnacht. State militias will also be mobilized to provide additional manpower and patrols. Those who don't live close enough to civilization to be protected by either stout stone walls or patrolling militia members simply lock their doors, barricade their windows, and sharpen whatever weaponry they have at hand, and pray to Sigmar that they'll get through another night. Some prayers are answered, many are not. And the morning after Geheimnisnacht is usually one of counting the cost, as the various elected counts, local governmental officials, mayors and provosts all go about their territories and their relative areas of responsibility, seeing what was ruined this year, what villages were burned, which people were kidnapped, and, hopefully, what kind of measures were taken by local witch hunters, inquisitors, or state militia to root out the cults or beastmen warbands emboldened by the night's charades. In the worst-case scenarios, the dawning day will see the beginning of large-scale counter-campaigns to reclaim lost territory occupied by beastmen or chaos marauders or even monsters, as it's not just humans, elves, dwarves, or various such critters that fear the night. Monsters as well, like manticores, dragons, and dragon ogres. Many of these creatures grow considerably more active during these two times of year, and many grow equally hostile as well. Normally, a stoutly fortified village will provide plentiful protection against wandering trolls, or even the occasional giant, or the local militia with their crossbows and arrows might be enough to chase off a manticore if it's somehow wandered its way this far south, a rare occurrence in and of itself. But after Geheimnisnacht, it is not too rare an occurrence for the state militia to have to reclaim a local community from some band of creatures that invaded it during the preceding night, either wiping out the population, or if they were lucky, they were able to hide deep in basements or high in fortified loft and tower houses. But don't worry, I'm sure your Christmas celebration will be nowhere near that eventful. We live in a much safer world, after all, and our moon isn't green. Is it? Let's hope not. Until next time and next year, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and please have a good day, a Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year.